Hello. Welcome, everybody, to Noticias Day Talking Madrid. It is Ray, your host, on April 22nd, 2025, 5 o'clock my time, bright and early. I just wanted to talk about a few things. I didn't really have a post-match reaction to the Athletic Club match. It was, I was out and about. It was Easter. Hope everyone had a good Easter for those who are celebrating, but I just quickly wanted to talk about that. As you see here, obviously, we won 1-0. I thought, obviously, Valverde with an absolute screamer. Valverde doesn't score any kind of normal goal. It's always going to be dramatic. It's always going to be a screamer. So, Fede Valverde for everybody. And I also think that this kind of highlights his importance of being in that midfield. As we see here, we'll just go through some of the stats and we'll make this long. 73% possession, to 27, 1.51 expected goals, total shots, 22 to 3, 7 shots on targets to 1, 3 big chances to 0, 603 accurate passes to 168. And obviously, we scored in the 90th or the 93rd minute. And just really quickly, I just wanted to talk about our players and our lineups and everything like that. It's unfortunate that Carlo Ancelotti, with all the news about his departure coming in the coming weeks, that he decided to try out this lineup. The lineup that has Valverde as right back, Asensio, Rudiger, and Camavinga as our back line, with Ceballos, Tchouameni, Modric, and Bellingham obviously as the front four. And then we have the Vinicius and Rodrigo up top. And like I said, I think it's unfortunate that Ancelotti, it took him this long to try this lineup, because we would probably have a little bit more success throughout the league and some of our cup competitions if we did have this lineup. But I do think that he was kind of hamstrung with the fact is that all of our midfielders were either suspended or with injury, and we just got Ceballos back. And obviously, Valverde got 8.7. I think he was the MVP of the match. Him and Vinicius were going band for MVP or man of the match. I thought Vinicius. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I don't want to start wars between fan bases, like player FCs and stuff. But I think we've had enough sample size to kind of see that Vinicius plays a lot better without Mbappe on the field and vice versa. I think Mbappe's best run with this team was when Vinicius was out suspended or Vinicius was injured, and same with Vinicius. Like when Mbappe is out or suspended as well, Vinicius just whatever it seems like he just doesn't have a second thought. His first thought is always to take on that first man. And when he's not really burdened by trying to connect or trying to play with another player like Mbappe, he just seems to be more of like himself. Like he seemed like a man possessed today. He was taking on players left and right. He was beating his man. He was doing crosses in. He was relentless. And that's kind of the Vinicius of old. The Vinicius of last season that used to torture Bayern, that used to torture a lot of the teams that we played in that late Champions League run. He, tortured Dortmund as well. So that's great to see. Vinicius always plays with a chip on his shoulder. He plays very emotional, but when it's on, and he always showcases why he's probably the top 3 winger in the world, top 2 winger in the world when he's on. So it was good to see that he is turning it on, at least at this phase. I wish it was a little bit sooner. We could have definitely used that a little bit more in the Champions League, but I do believe that Arsenal were ready for that. I think Arsenal was ready for that, and also I believe that the front 3, and I also believe that this is another. We've seen once again that the best lineup for this team currently is a 4-4-2 with this manager. Carlo Ancelotti always likes his 4-4-2, but I do believe that there are times where he has hamstrung Rodrigo into the lineup. Rodrigo, 7.1. I think there's a crazy stat about how he has like 0 GAs or goal contributions in the last like 13 or 14 matches. And I do think that's something that we need to discuss, especially with the fact that Rodrigo has been playing right wing for the past 2-3 seasons now, and I don't see very much improvement. You would think that a player of that quality would be able to adapt to that position. Call me old, call me like a boomer or whatnot. But back in the day when I used to watch football, or even when I used to play football, right-footed players were able to play on the right wing. Cristiano Ronaldo started out the right wing at Man United as well. So the fact is that he's having an extremely hard time being able to, acclimate to that position is something that's worrisome. And I believe at this point, even though you always want to have your best players on the pitch, I do believe that you have like a point of diminishing returns at some point where it's like if he can't contribute, well, he does defend. I'll give him that, but also like I said, defending isn't so much of a skill. Obviously, like defense, like defensive positional awareness and all that, that is. But just running around and putting effort isn't a skill. Like we could have Brahim there, we could have Arda Güler there, we can have other players who are going to be able to put the work in, going back and helping to defend. But we do need people that help out with goal contributions. And if this is the case, going forward, and I'll do when I do my preview for the Barcelona match and the lineups and tactics and what I think we need to do with that, with Hansi Flick's high line. I do believe that you might have to bench Rodrigo. I do believe that the front two, and this is a little spoiler for that video and that conversation coming up, is going to be that Rodrigo probably should go to the bench and be an impact sub, and have Mbappe and Vinicius up front, Bellingham as the attacking mid, number 10, who's able to crash the box and has an aerial presence. And then play with the four in the midfield, and then have the same fullbacks with the Valverde and Camavinga. So just a little bit of preview of that. Just wanted to speak on that. It was very nervous, very nerve wracking. I was kind of almost accepting the fact that we would not take La Liga this year. But Valverde seemed to surprise me. Modric, I thought had a good game. Athletic kind of played their B team, which is okay because it looks like they're putting a lot of their energy into the Europa League. And I believe, who are they playing? I think they're playing Man United. I think they're playing Man United. But yeah, they play their B team. It's okay. I think everything's kind of shored up for them as well with Champions League going forward. I think there's a report saying that I think Spain has 5 teams going into the Champions League next season, which is great for the league, great for exposure for the league, as well as like being able to see the technical quality of La Liga. I do remember EPL fans were kind of going crazy and bragging about the fact that they had 5, but we don't have to brag about it. We just have to show what we do on the pitch. But I thought Modric did well. Bellingham, I think we're kind of running him into the ground. I think this is how it happened similarly last season. Bellingham was, he flew at the start. I think that, we asked him to do so much defensive covering for a lot of our other players. And, he's still injured with his shoulder, which I do think he needs to get surgery on, which is another thing that we should talk about in the near future. And his involvement in the Club World Cup, I'm pretty sure he wants to be involved with that. But I'm thinking long term for this season upcoming that it probably is the best decision for him probably to get that surgery as soon as the last game of the league is done. But I think that he's kind of slowing down. I think he's exhausted. Him and Valverde, I believe, are just doing so much work in the middle. And hopefully, if a new manager does come in, we're able to put him into a system where we're not just running him into the ground, and by the time he's 25, his legs are gone, which is something that I'm getting scared about. Especially even with Valverde too. Like, we're putting so much mileage on these players, and Jude is so young. I think Jude's 20? Is he still 20 or is he 21 now? Jude is still so young, but he's putting so many miles on his legs that unfortunately, we see with other players that like they start to peter out by the time like they're in their late 20s and early 30s. And I do believe if Jude wants, and hopefully he does, from everything that he says, that he wants to be here for the next decade, and I definitely see him as captain material and one of the vocal leaders of the club, that we would want him up until his 30, 31, 32, 33. Tchouaméni, I think Tchouaméni is in his best form of his career, at least for this season. I think Tchouaméni was kind of cursed or burdened with the fact that he can play multiple positions. I think that he's been great and a servant of the club for the fact that when asked, he went to the center back position and helped out with Rudiger, or when Rudiger was out, he stepped back into that position. But there wasn't a lot of continuity with him as a DM. Now that we have Asensio, and Asensio has established himself as a starter in this back line finally, and obviously Rudiger is there as well, that he can actually play in his preferred position. So I think once you have Tchouaméni, I think Tchouaméni's best qualities is not the primary deep lying playmaker, but I think that's more of a secondary for him. But I think the best for him is obviously his defensive contributions. and his defensive interceptions. And some of his ball carrying, like he does have ball carrying abilities, but usually for him, I think he's more comfortable just kind of sitting in that pocket and having players like Modric and Ceballos be the ones who kind of dictate the play, the tempo, and the style of the team. And while he can fit in as the secondary, I think from the sample size that we have that Tchouaméni is more so of just that's more of a secondary for him, and he rather give that responsibility off to someone else. Because there have been times where I've seen Valverde and Tchouaméni or Tchouaméni and Kama in a double pivot, and there are many times, and it's not just Tchouaméni. Kamavinga is somewhat a little bit like that. Kamavinga looks for the ball a little bit more. I think is a little bit more technically sound, but still there were times where both of them whatever the two combinations where there was Kama and Chua or Chua and Valverde, where they kind of just look at each other and kind of like they don't really understand who's actually going to go step towards the ball, who's going to go collect the ball from Courtois, who's going to collect the ball off of Rudiger and stuff like that, to where teams would press and then we would have to do a long ball out to our wide players like Vinicius or Rodrigo on either flank. So I think it's really good. I think this is where he plays the best. Where you got this 8.1 is where that is more of a secondary role for him, and his primary role obviously is just to be an outlet to these two players, defensive contributions, passing lanes, and just defensive, just sitting in front of these two players right here, just to have some cover. Ceballos is still coming back from injury. He's I just want him to get minutes under his legs, because definitely what we'll need him for, it will be for this game on Saturday against Barcelona. I think the key for us to be able to win that game is to have him with minutes, with confidence, playing in that midfield, because he is the only player of that controller Pausa kind of profile. And I think that's something that we've been sorely missing. And once we have him in the team with confidence and being able to play at that high level, we actually kind of revert back to kind of how we played last season. Even though it wasn't the prettiest football, it was still functional to the point where we were able to win the double. I think once we have the defensive structure now, I think we figured out the team that's going to work for us going forward, even if it's in like the 32nd week of the league. It is this back line. We have a defensive cover here. Ceballos also has a lot of defensive interceptions, and I think these two obviously right in front of the back four. This is a solid back six. Then we can have our more creative players here, Vinicius, Rodrigo, Bellingham, and Modric, really be able to, obviously Valverde bombing up this line, have the offensive output and be able to at least be solid in the back, a lot more balance in here. And that's why you can see when we're playing a team of athletic clubs caliber, we have, what was it, 73% possession, right? We have, well, I guess, yeah. Well, yeah, 73% possession, 27 versus 27. And then if you look at the momentum, we had the momentum all game. All game. Obviously, they had a chance here, a few chances here, but ultimately we were just on top of them the entire game. So those are just some of my thoughts for for this game. It wasn't too crazy. It wasn't a big goal flurry. I think the biggest thing was Valverde's strike. Like I said, we need to see those 40 shots by Valverde. That's kind of been going around social media. We'll look forward to seeing that. But next topic, I kind of want to go into some of the news that came out this morning. And Kylian Mbappe and Ferland Mendy are back in team training. I think this is great. Obviously, we've missed both of them, especially Mendy. I'm surprised. I don't know what is going on with Mendy. Mendy had an overload, and he's been out for about like a month or so. This always seems to happen around this time of year, or actually usually it's around Christmas, and then he comes back for this final stretch, and then that's when we go for our long runs. I definitely believe that the games with Arsenal would be a lot different if we had Mendy back in that left back position. Obviously, Alaba, was put into a position that I don't think that he was able to thrive in. I think Ancelotti, kind of put him out there to dry. But with that being said, he didn't really have much choice. You either put Alaba or you put Fran, and it just seems that Ancelotti doesn't have a lot of faith with Fran, with his defensive capabilities. So we went with Ferland Mendy. But like I said, it's good that both of them are here. I also believe here there's more training photos of Kylian out on the field testing his ankle. I don't believe that Kylian is going to be playing tomorrow. I do believe that Kylian is trying to obviously be there for the Copa del Rey final, because I think, and whether it's from a starting position or whether, coming off the bench, just having him back in the lineup. It also adds like another fear factor for Barcelona. They can't have their high line if they know that there's no Kylian Mbappe, there's not a lot of threat in behind. Even though we have Vinicius and Rodrigo, and they did get in behind multiple times last year when we played them. Um, just having that threat either in the starting lineup or on the bench, I think is a huge add, and it helps for us mentally and them as well. I like to think that probably he won't start, and I think the best for us going forward for that game would probably just to have Rodrigo and Vinicius start, and then have Kylian Mbappe come in if it's getting a little too crazy, or like if it's like 1-0 down in like the 60th or 55th. That's when you kind of bring in, excuse me, that's when you bring in Kylian Mbappe, and you can use his deadly pace with tired defenders. Just balls over the top, balls, played in behind. There definitely needs to be training of how to beat that high line. We've seen so many teams like Dortmund was easily able to, Dortmund and Celta Vigo. Like I need to get some screenshots so I can show you people how easily it is to beat Barcelona's high line. So many teams just allow them to collect the ball and allow them then to push forward. And then all it takes is literally one transition pass. One transition pass. Kubarsi and Inigo Martinez or Araujo are literally inside of the opposition's half. And all it takes is one ball over the top, and all our forwards have the pace to be able to beat any of them, especially because Alejandro Balde is out, right, for the foreseeable future. But I digress. I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. But yeah, Kylian Mbappe and Ferland Mendy both trained with the team today, so I think it's good that they're back in training, and hopefully that we can see them on Saturday. Just a little bit of older news. I didn't get to this over the weekend. Just like I said, it was a holiday weekend. If Carlo Ancelotti leaves Real Madrid before Club World Cup, the option will have Xabi Alonso for the tournament or an internal solution like Santiago Solari. But the priority will be Xabi. Yep, just more reporting from Fabrizio Romano. Fabrizio Romano doesn't really have any sources in Real Madrid, so always take this with a grain of salt. He is getting this information from other journalists. He's not breaking it himself. I do believe that Carlo Ancelotti will leave probably by the end of this league, depending on. Actually, I do believe I've seen reports that they're going to do a big presentation and a big farewell for Carlo Ancelotti, and I think rightly so. He deserves it. He is our most winningest coach of all time. Obviously, he helped us with La Decima. I think he has 3 Champions Leagues with us as well. An incredible coach, incredible manager, man manager, and I think a lot of players love him and think of him as a fatherly figure. I think it just in this moment, we need something a little different because these players aren't responding to it, and I think the game has gone in a way where tactics and systems are dominant. And I think the only way, if you don't have something like that, and I think everyone should have a system, and whether that system is in as simple as just having a back four which is solid and a balanced midfield, then allowing your front players to be able to be all action. If that's your system, then that's your system. But we don't have that. We don't have that, and whether that's due to the fact that we didn't promote any young players, and then we've had to move players back into positions that they're not comfortable in, whether that there's no signings from the board, even though Ancelotti expressed that we need signings, or whether that there's like no system for the front players to actually press, or the voice just wasn't strong enough in having them press. If something needs to change, this is Real Madrid. Carlo Ancelotti should know that better than anyone because this is his second stint here at the club. Same thing happened after La Decima as well. It was a poor second campaign, and then he was replaced. So yeah, I believe that Xabi Alonso will probably come in. Hopefully, Xabi Alonso comes in before the Club World Cup. But I think all reports and indications are pointing to the fact that Santiago Solari will be the one who will be at the interim manager for the Club World Cup, and Xabi Alonso will then come in after. I don't know exactly how I feel about that. I rather have had Xabi Alonso. I would rather have him in for the Club World Cup and being able to, you know, just be with the players and see where they're at and train with them during that entire month or that entire preseason. I don't know why. I don't know if it's something to do with his Bayer Leverkusen contract. I'm not exactly sure, and hopefully there's be more detailed reporting on the reason as to why it has to be after the Club World Cup. Um, but or it probably could be because the Club World Cup is technically still part of this season, And after that, obviously, would be the start of the 2025-2026 season. So it probably something like that. But I would love to at least get Xabi Alonso's signings in during the Club World Cup, or at least having negotiations going on at that moment, so that by the time that Xabi Alonso is able to come in fully in his capacity, that at least he'll have the players that he wants, or the players that he needs to be able to implement that what is it, that 3-4-1-2 formation. Yeah, I believe it's a 3-4-1-2. All right. The next thing I wanted to talk about, once again, just another report from Fabrizio Romano stating here that last year Xabi Alonso rejected Premier League clubs in Bayern. He told Leverkusen that if Real Madrid come for him in 2025, that will be his priority. Just another report kind of confirming what I think a lot of us already knew, that Xabi Alonso is waiting for the call from Florentino Perez. I do believe that they've spoken through an intermediary, whether that be an agent or whether it be his agency. And I think everything's kind of, you know, I think the reports that have been coming out for the past few weeks are true. I think that Xabi Alonso is coming in. And I hope that he comes in because, Xabi Alonso was my favorite player when he was on the team. Well, besides Cristiano. I always thought I really liked the way he played. I thought he played a style similar to Cruz, I would say. A very passing style. He was able to hit those long diagonals. And I think that was one of the biggest things that endeared me to him, was the fact that he's able to play those long diagonals and be able to play Cristiano in over the top, or whether Di Maria at the time, and all that stuff. So I would love to see that happen a little bit more. I would love to see his style. I would love to see his pressing. I would love to see his diagonal passing and short passes and interchanges. I would like to see the right wing backs be able to push up the field and cause overloads on the flanks. I'm just really excited. I'm really excited for the future, and hopefully this comes to pass. And it's looking so every single day. Another Fabrizio Romano report also stated that the verbal agreement between Real Madrid and Trent is in its final stages, and here we go is expected. I do not have the picture of Trent when he went and celebrated against Leicester. With that was a crazy goal, crazy volley with his opposite foot, 73rd minute or 70th minute, I think 5 minutes after he was subbed on. Just excellent footballer. If he does come and join, like everyone's stating, we are getting an excellent player, an excellent striker of the ball, something that we haven't had in our team. I think from us it's really Valverde, Jude, Arda, and then if Trent comes, it'd be Trent, who are very excellent at striking the ball. A lot of our forward players are not the greatest at striking the ball and have very poor technique. And there's a reason why we've scored so few from direct kicks, and our corner kicks aren't the greatest and stuff. But I do think that if we get an opportunity to get a player of this caliber, it just raises our ceiling that much higher. I'm hoping that Xabi Alonso has a system. Obviously, the 3-4-2-1. Trent, I'm assuming, would be a wing back, and he'd be able to invert as much as possible. If we need to play a 4-3-3, that's okay. Trent could still play on the right, and him and Carvajal can kind of fight for that right back position. But also Trent would be able to invert into that midfield very easily. But in defense, would be in a 4-3-3. But when we're attacking, he can easily just invert into the midfield, and we can have a 3-4-3, or or whatever, 3-3-5-2, whatever Xabi Alonso wants to play. But Trent is amazing. Hopefully it happens. I'm crossing my fingers. I'm not trying to say it too out loud. I'm not trying to get pie on my face, especially with these kind of transfers. We've seen it before with Kylian, and I still have PTSD from that transfer saga, where now I'm just kind of, when I see the Sanitas picture, or when I see him getting unveiled and we have a comunicado oficial, that's when I'll believe that Trent's here at the club. But like I said, everything is kind of pointing to the fact that he is and will be joining Real Madrid at the end of the season. They have one more game before they win the league, and I'm hoping to see a statement from him in the coming days about his departure from Liverpool. And once I believe that what'll end up happening, there'll probably be a video saying that he won't be re-signing, and then not until the end of the season or match day 38 will Real Madrid ever announce anything that they will be signing Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think this is kind of how we go about it. We don't speak about players who are not our players. So I believe that's probably going to be the course of action. But once we get that departure video, that's when I'll be like, okay, we got Trent. So another report from Bild. I was a little surprised by this. Bild is the German newspaper. German is one, I think, if not the biggest, the largest German newspaper, is saying that Real Madrid is Florian Wirtz's priority. He believes a move would bring him closer to the Ballon d'Or. Um, Obviously, a player of that quality you always want to welcome that into your squad. I don't know how that would be possible, especially with the fact is that we Real Madrid, for whatever reason, can't seem to pay 50 or 60 million a release clause for Dean Huijsen. I don't exactly know. I wouldn't even know how this would work. We would have to sell like two players for us to even try to bring a player of this quality in, because I believe before that Bayer Leverkusen put not a release clause, but I think they said that they would not accept anything less than like 120 million for Florian Wirtz. So even if XABI Alonso wants to bring him over, and even if this is the case, we would have to probably sell like Rodrigo to be able to fund this to be able to fund this move. And I don't even know if that's something that the board would be interested in doing at this current moment. Would I do that? I would have to think about it, honestly. I would have to think about it. Rodrigo, I love Rodrigo, but I also understand that he does not play well on the right. And that's the only position that he's going to be able to play in. Because right now, Jude is going to be the 10. Vinny is always going to be the left mid. Mbappe is going to be the forward. So, I struggle to find a place for Rodrigo, especially if we're going to start playing a 4-4-2 or start playing a 3-4-2-1. All those positions are kind of sorted, unless they're all sorted. And if you move Rodrigo back to the bench, that means you're pushing back Brahim. That means you're pushing back Arda. It looks like Modric is trying to renew for another season. You have Ceballos. XABI Alonso wants to get Zubimendi from all reports. So Rodrigo's, I think, we're coming to a crossroads, I believe, and I think that hard decisions need to be made, especially when it comes to Rodrigo. Hard decisions need to be made, essentially. And whether, I think he either needs to understand that, at least at Real Madrid, until his output is a little bit better, and his confidence gets up higher, he's going to have to probably come off the bench, and we're most likely going to see that in the Copa del Rey. Oh, well, not the Copa. Well, depending on Kylian Mbappe's fitness, but we'll probably see that for the Copa del Rey final. But even moving forward, maybe it's better for him to move to another club where he can play left wing and get his confidence back up and be the player that a lot of us wished he could be at Real Madrid, but it just hasn't materialized at that right back position or that right wing or right forward position. But this is interesting. I just don't believe that it's very credible. I don't believe that Real Madrid has the money to be able to pull this off. And then, like I said, we have a lot of young players like Arda Güler. What happens to Arda Güler? I think obviously Florian Wirtz is a little further along. It's not a little. He's a lot further along in his development. I think Arda Güler hasn't really had the opportunities to grow, and with the limited playing time that he has, especially with Carlo Ancelotti. And then what happens to that? If we bring another player that would play in those double 10, the two tens in the two attacking mids or the two attacking tens, and that 3-4-2-1. You're going to put Wirtz there. You're going to put Bellingham there, and then obviously Mbappe. Then you have to figure out where you're going to put Vinicius. Is Vinicius going to be your left wing back, be able to have that entire flank, or is Vinicius going to have to play in one of those two spots? All I'm saying is it just adds more. It adds more problems to already unbalanced squad. So I don't really see this happening, and if it does, there are going to have to be major conversations about who's going to be staying at Real Madrid. Just another report from Marca stating that Ferland Mendy will not play against Getafe. The goal for him is to be ready for the cup final. And obviously, I still think that this is wishful thinking. He hasn't played in over 2 months. I don't see him in any kind of world being able to play, obviously, tomorrow. But even for Saturday, I just don't see it. I think this is just more propaganda from the club, kind of stating that just trying to get in the head of Barcelona, try to be like, Mendy will be back. But I honestly he's probably going to be Camavinga. And even if he gets back, are you going to just throw him into the biggest game of probably the year? I highly doubt. If anything, he would be a sub coming in like the 60th or whatever. If we need more offensive. We need more offensive output. You put him and then you move Camavinga up into the midfield so we can go chase a goal or something like that. But I just don't see where Ferland Mendy is going to be starting this. So this is my lineup, and this is a little preview for the game against Getafe. This would be my lineup for Getafe. I'm assuming what's going to end up happening is Getafe is going to sit in a very low block. We all know Bordalas. He's just going to sit back, sit back, sit back. So with that being said, I would play Lucas Vasquez, Asensio, Rudiger, Fran, Tchouaméni, obviously as our D mid, Ceballos, Valverde, Bellingham, Mbappe, and Mbappe is going to be out. Excuse me. This should be Rodrigo. Excuse me, and it should be Rodrigo. I mean, if you want to be a little bit more defensive and you want to be a little bit, you can add Kamavinga here just to be a little bit more sure. I'm cool with that. I do believe that we need to get Valverde into this midfield. I do believe the fact that they're just going to be sitting in a low block, that this should probably be our midfield, and have Bellingham crashing the box in here. Obviously, have Ceballos to get more minutes so he's able to play over the weekend. And if the thing is, if you need to take him off at the 60th minute, we can put Modric in. I opted to not start Modric in this lineup just because of the fact is that he's 39 years old. He's 39 years old, and I do believe that he has the best impact when he's coming off the bench against tired legs. And I think that's the way that we probably should utilize this. I think that we have enough physicality here and enough technical ability here to be able to overload them in the midfield. And or I think Rodrigo and Vinicius, just try to get a goal here, nick a goal here, do your skills out here, and have Bellingham then just be the third attacker in this. Obviously, he's had to come back and track back if need so, but being able to crash the box here to get on the crosses for Rodrigo, to get a crosses, or Vinicius, or even Valverde, I think Bellingham had quite a few chances last game just because of the formation, and it was kind of back to the Bellingham of old where we really need to get goals. So I do think that this would be the best lineup going forward. I'm trying to rest players. Obviously, we're not resting Valverde here and stuff, but I'm trying to rest Kamavinga here, trying to rest a little bit, Modric, because we're most likely going to have to use him against Barcelona. And so it's a little preview of what I would, what my lineup would be against Getafe tomorrow. Just because, like I said, they're going to be sitting in a low block. We need Jude Bellingham to be an aerial threat, especially if we're going to have Vasquez here, crossing in. Valverde, long shots, Ceballos for control, and obviously Tchouaméni for their defensive contributions. Fran can help assist going up on the field as well, doing crosses into the box, cutbacks in for Bellingham. And so this is my projected lineup. This is my projected lineup against Getafe. So I want to go to some reactions. Carlo Ancelotti had a presser earlier today, and kind of speaking about everything kind of going on around the club, as well as the Copa del Rey final and Getafe and some of the tactics. So I just want to go over that.
Tenso, muy bien organizado, con muchos duelos, un equipo fuerte, que tiene idea muy clara, entonces nos espera este tipo de partido. Creo que estamos listos, preparados, porque más se acerca el final de la temporada, más importantes son los partidos para todos los equipos, porque nos jugamos mucho y queremos seguir adelante.
So Carlo Ancelotti is essentially stating that, the later it gets into the season, every single one of these games essentially is becoming a final, which is very true. Every single game going forward is going to be a cup final, so that, for the league, because Barcelona is not letting up. They had another comeback against Celta Vigo over the weekend. I think they were down multiple times, and they came back to win 4-3. So Barcelona is just continuing to have great form and continue. So every game we're going to have to win. We're going to have to win the game against Getafe. We did well against Athletic. I think Athletic and Getafe were the two big banana peels for us in case of like a slip up. But now it's all for this Copa del Rey final, as well as the El Clásico away. And we have to win every single one of these games.
¿Qué tal, Carlos? Muy buenas. Fernando Burgos, Onda Cero. Analizando un poco esta temporada que ya alcanza los 55 partidos como la pasada. Ustedes el año pasado jugaron 55 partidos y este año les quedan mínimo 10, ¿no? Viendo muchos partidos, ¿no tiene la impresión de que ha estado condicionado en muchos por meter a lo que llamamos nosotros los 4 fantásticos. Es verdad que han hecho 80 y tantos goles de 120, pero que a lo mejor algún partido le ha pedido un centrocampista más.
So the reporter essentially said that you've played like 55 games this season, similar to last season. And do you believe that you've been influenced to play the Fantastic Four, which I'm assuming is the front three of Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Bellingham all together? And he's asking, should you have played more central mids?
Bueno, no, yo no creo que es un problema de... Los problemas que hemos tenido esta temporada digamos, son bastante evidentes, no hay mucho que decir. Hemos perdido 2 piezas fundamentales atrás que nos ha costado un poco reemplazarlo. Hemos cambiado un poco la idea de nuestro juego porque tenemos jugadores con distintas características y hemos buscado dificultad a encontrar este equilibrio que ojalá lo podemos encontrar en este último tramo, porque en este último tramo no jugamos mucho. En los partidos que se quedan, si no tenemos el equilibrio, tenemos dificultad en ganar, pero si lo tenemos, se puede ganar.
He didn't really address that. He essentially stated that we lost key pieces in defenders and Toni Kroos in the midfield, and that it's difficult winning when you're losing a lot of key midfielders and defenders, and it doesn't have a lot to do with attack. But if we don't have balance, it's very hard and very difficult to win. So it didn't really address the question. I think he kind of skated past it. I do believe that the correct answer is probably yes. We should have had, not even probably, I believe that we should have gone with a 4-4-2, especially if we lost a lot. If we didn't have balance defensively and we lost a lot of players, I think a fourth midfielder would have helped us. And while we may have not had the same attacking threat, at least we wouldn't be getting blown out, 5-1 aggregates, 9-2 aggregates against Barcelona. I do think that having the fourth midfielder would have been great, but I also have to take into consideration that we had so many suspensions and so many injuries. It's hard to say that these are the players that were going to be able to play in that midfield. I think ultimately, if the club and the board were not willing to give any signings, I believe that we should have then promoted our Castilla and our academy players to be able to play. I believe, what was his name? Aguado. I think Aguado was a right back, to play him consistently. I think he played in the Copa del Rey final or a Copa del Rey match, and I thought he played pretty well. It wasn't like a standout, but he also wasn't bad. So I think just kind of promoting from within to be able to fill in those positions, and then keeping the players that we have, who are keeping our midfielders who are their best positions in the midfield, and to apply even more cover and to have a scheme or a setup to be able to hide our deficiencies. If we know that it's going to be a weak link, at least we have someone who understands the positional awareness and positional spacing with the back line. And then we just have to have our midfielders, in the case of defending, just be able to track or be able to cover in cases of if they're trying to overload that side or they're trying to target that side.
¿Qué tal, Carlos? Iván Martín, de Aquí Diario. Hemos visto entrenar a Mbappé y a Mendy. Yo te quería preguntar cómo están ellos de cara al partido de mañana y, sobre todo, de cara al partido de la final de Copa.
De cara al partido de mañana no están listos, pero entrenarán en estos días. Creo que pueden ser disponibles los dos para el partido de sábado.
Essentially, he was just saying that Ferland Mendy and Mbappe are not going to be ready for the game tomorrow. But they could be available for the Saturday's game.
Espera. ¿Qué tal, mister? Aquí Andrés Rubio para Televisión Española. Faltan solo 4 días para esa final de Copa. Yo no sé si pensando en el 11 de mañana puede usted verse un poco condicionado y pensar en alguna que otra rotación.
No.
The reporter essentially asked that we have 4 or 5 days up into the Cup final. Has this conditioned you, or has this made you think about rotating the lineup?
El 11 de mañana saliera teniendo en cuenta el desgaste que hemos tenido domingo por la noche. Es solo esto. Me parece que los jugadores han recuperado todo bastante bien en el entrenamiento de hoy, pero en el entrenamiento de hoy algunos siguen un poco cansados, pero es bastante normal. Y mañana veremos.
He then stated that the players have trained well. It's okay to feel a little tired. That happens at this part of the season, and that any decisions that he's made is not for the game on Sunday, but is more so just from the game over the weekend.
Hola, Carlos. Buenas tardes, Miguel Ángel, día de la cadena COPE. Van a ser cinco semanas en las que obviamente se va a hablar mucho de lo que va a pasar en el banquillo del Real Madrid la próxima temporada. Ya nos ha dejado claro que no hablas de tu futuro hasta el final. Pero siendo optimista...
Pero no tiene preguntas si no hablamos de esto.
Es una reflexión. Llevamos toda la mañana los compañeros hablando un poco,
sí.
¿no? Te puedes imaginar.
¿Qué habéis sacado a esta discusión? ¿Qué habéis sacado?
Me ha llamado la atención una frase. ¿No?
Póneme también a mí en esta tertulia.
Si el Madrid gana la Liga y la Copa, y el Barça no acaba ganando la Champions,
¿Sí?
¿sería posible que Ancelotti la próxima temporada no fuera el entrenador del Madrid?
En el fútbol todo es posible. ¿Tú te sorprendes de algo de lo que pasa en el fútbol?
Yeah, so essentially the reporters went on a long soliloquy about nothing, essentially. Then Ancelotti's like, is there any questions in there? But essentially what he said is like, if we win the Copa del Rey final, and if we win the Copa del Rey final, we win the league, and Barcelona does not win the Champions League, is there a future in which you are on that bench?
A mí no me sorprende absolutamente nada, entonces todo puede pasar.
He says that, nothing's ever certain in football. Nothing surprises me at all at this point, and we'll see what happens. I think it's just like a candid Ancelotti answer about his future. He doesn't really like to speak about what's in the future. He'd rather speak about what's in the now, and I think that's smart. There's no reason to, feed the fire or fuel the fire. In this case, I think he understands where the club is at right now, and unless there's something that is crazy, something that is egregious, something that is outrageous that ends up happening, and where well, I guess in this case would be Copa del Rey and La Liga, I do expect XABI Alonso to be the next manager for Real Madrid coming next season.
¿Qué tal, mister? Buenos días, Javier Herrera de la cadena SER. ¿A usted le gustaría tener ese próximo año en el banquillo para demostrar, no que es capaz de ganar títulos, que lo ha demostrado, sino tener esa pequeña revancha por las lesiones, porque este año la cosa no ha funcionado? ¿Le encantaría tener la opción de dirigir al Madrid el próximo año?
Yo de verdad no tengo ninguna revancha contra nadie, contra nada. Como siempre he dicho, me encanta este banquillo, me ha encantado la primera etapa, me está encantando esta segunda. Y que esto pueda seguir lo más lejos posible. Y después, si un día va a terminar...
Yeah, so that was another weird question. The reporters are continuing to ask him the same thing over and over again. Essentially, do you plan on being here next season? Like, do you want any revenge? Are you happy with the players that you have on the bench? Do you want to see new players on the bench? Essentially saying, like, I think they're just kind of referring to the fact that there are reports saying that Ancelotti wanted replacements for a lot of the players that were either injured or left last season, and the board they weren't considering that. So, I think this question is just kind of asking, do you want to see new players on the bench? And then he's just saying that he's happy with the players on the bench. He's happy with the players on the second bench. And, he would love to continue, but, things happen in football, and there's always an end to a cycle. There's always an end. There's an end for everything, essentially.
Ella ha dicho, agradecer, quitarme el sombrero a este club, nada más.
Hola, mister Antonio Muela, Radio Nacional de España. El otro día, Kylian MBAPPE recibió algunos silbidos. No sé si has podido hablar con él, si le encuentras con buen ánimo, si le ha sorprendido y también tu opinión, ¿no? Porque sorprende que con 33 goles que lleva parece desmedido, ¿no?
He leído
The reporter essentially was asking Kylian Mbappe did get whistles when he was shown on the Jumbotron at the Santiago Bernabéu over the weekend, and he was stating that even though he has 33 goals this season, is he in good spirits? Is it unfair that the fans are whistling him and not whistling some of the other players on the team who have kind of underperformed throughout this entire year?
Yo no he escuchado esto. Él está dolido por la lesión porque no puede ayudar al equipo. Lo está intentando todo para ser disponible para el sábado.
Mister,
Then Ancelotti went on to say that he didn't hear any of the whistles throughout the game, and that he's just injured and he's trying to recover and try to help out for the team. He said that he hasn't heard anything from Kylian. He didn't hear it.
Ana Mantovani, TNT Sports Brasil. No te voy a preguntar por Brasil, te voy a preguntar por un brasileño, por Hendrik. Los últimos dos partidos llama la atención que ha sido de las primeras sustituciones que has hecho tú en el partido. ¿Qué ha cambiado para que veamos más a Hendrik?
And that was a reporter from Brazil asking, what happened? What have you seen from Hendrik, which caused you to make Hendrik one of the first substitutions in the lineup, compared to earlier in the season when Hendrik would only come in after like the 90th or the 92nd minute?
Nada, no ha cambiado nada especial, está progresando muy bien, como he dicho otras veces, está trabajando muy bien y tiene más protagonismo ahora porque también hay partidos que necesitamos su fuerza y su calidad.
And lastly, Carlo just said that nothing has changed. It's just that, there have been game states in where we need Hendrik's pace and strength in the front line, and that was the reason why he made that change. So that was kind of it for Ancelotti's press conference. I think a lot of the questions continue to be about his future, about subs, about the rest of the league, what he would do differently. I thought it was, a classic Ancelotti presser. He didn't really give them much. It was nothing really tangible. It was more just abstract things. He never gave a full answer. But like I said, all respect to Ancelotti. He has been our most winningest coach of all time. He's led us through some amazing times and periods. But I think, bar a miracle. Well, I'm not going to call it a miracle, but bar something that is, extraordinary from the club and a very, very strong finish. I do believe that this is the end of his tenure, and I do think that's something that we should all celebrate, even though it's been a tough season, even though it's been hard to see Barcelona play as well as they've been playing this year. We have to remember, last year we did win the double, and then, the year before, we made it to the semis of the Champions League, and then the year prior to that, we won the Champions League again. I think we won the double again last year. I think that year too, or did XABI win? I'm not exactly sure. But like I said, 3 Champions Leagues in his tenure. Most teams don't even have 3 in the last 10. So just for the one manager, the fact that we were able to get 3 is just, we are blessed to have Carlo Ancelotti, and we're blessed for him to have a large chunk of our history. And hopefully, we can send him off with at least with his head high, with at least a trophy. So hopefully that the players play for him extra hard and, sacrifice for him. And then, we have a good game against Barcelona. Hopefully the fact is that Lewandowski and Balde are both injured. That can give us a little bit of a boost that we don't have to worry about Lewandowski. Ferran Torres brings his own problems, but that's something I think that we can plan for, and, we can have a good game. That is it for the news for today. It ran a little bit longer than I thought, but it's always good to be on stream with you guys. It's always good to kind of go over this and have kind of a little therapy session for this season. Here's to what's going to happen in the future. We have 2 big games this week, and I'm looking forward to that. You should have match predictions for Getafe. You should have match predictions for the Copa del Rey final. I will have also another video kind of detailing how Barcelona play and how I think that we should play. We should play against them and be able to have a good game against them and try to expose their weaknesses. A lot of it comes from, what you saw Dortmund play, or how Dortmund played against them, as well as how Celta Vigo played against them as well. But thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining the stream. It was great. I try to do these every morning, every weekday morning. Let me say that. Over the weekend's a little bit harder, obviously, because life and whatnot. But like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Follow the page if you're on X, or if you're on Twitter. Follow. I do news. I do a lot of commentary. I talk about like all things Madrid every day. If you're following on Twitch, follow as well. That would be greatly appreciated. I appreciate you guys all, and I'll see you in the next